Hi, everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host, Lei Xing, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news.
The year's
most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners, welcome back. We ask that you please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts about this podcast. And of course, tune in again in 2024. My name is Tu Li. I'm the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that was missing for 3 weeks, but I just sent out this week's yesterday, that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, 新年好, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Good morning. For the final time, I guess, in 2023. This is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 147 and the final episode of 2023. The last week, I tweeted that really has been the epitome of what was in 2023 in the China EV space. And so the year started out with Tesla cutting prices and is ending with Chery announcing the latest price cut into 2024.
Let me do this, Lei, because that was one of my highlights, or at least my things, the Tesla price war kind of initiated by Tesla. So let's go over really quickly. In January 1 of 2023, the Model 3 rear-wheel drive LFP version was 276,000 or 277,000 RMB, and they reduced it mid-January to 229.
January 6th.
Yeah, so to 229. So down almost 47,000 RMB, which is like $8,000. And today we have a refreshed Highland Model 3 that's priced at 261,000 RMB. So it's cheaper than when the year started, but more expensive than the original price cut. Now,
yes,
the other thing that you and I always have to deal with when we're dealing with China and the US, because we've, as Americans living abroad, is the exchange rate. January, the FX rate was, so I could buy 6.7 RMB for $1. I can buy 7.08 RMB for $1 today. So the currency has softened a little bit.
Yep.
And so overall, the Tesla vehicles are cheaper than they were still starting on January 1st, but not as cheap as they were during the course of this year.
Yeah, well, let's, for the sake of simplicity, just use 7, which is easy. But yes, I think that price cut really set off the tsunami or the dominoes falling. If you haven't cut prices, something probably wrong with you, right? I mean, everybody has done it one way or another. That was one of the themes of 2023.
And I think we can safely say that the foreign automakers, whether they're premium or mass market, in general terms, cut pricing more than their domestic counterparts.
Yeah, I mean, for the legacy, let's say, especially the premium, the EVs, they've been cutting prices behind the scenes
for 2 years, not just this year.
I mean, yeah, and still not competitive, except maybe for ID3, which worked. And now ID7 is really facing the same exact problem as the ID3. So, and speaking of, we can talk about the memorable moments, but I said it was all China EVs. I couldn't think of one foreign legacy EV model that really stood out throughout this year. I can't remember a single one. That's how I felt. I don't know if it's the same for you.
MG in Europe?
Well, come on.
I'm cheating. I'm cheating. The only thing I can think of is the Highland version of the Model 3. And I'm trying to stretch because you're absolutely right.
Well, except Tesla, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, even that is kind of subdued a little bit because of all the traffic that these other newbies are really getting. Xiaomi being the latest example. I mean, right?
It's getting a bit hammered and this is Chinese internet. This is not Western internet for looking like a Lincoln, looking like a McLaren, and looking like a Taycan. So,
but look at the coverage even on X of Xiaomi being, mentioned, tweeted by all these KOLs and
well, he
Bloomberg,
did live
right?
stream on X, so that kind of helps.
So this is I mean,
but Ash, friend of China EVs and more, he tweeted that that's still more than 12 months away from going into production. So in China terms, that's like 5 years for the West, because they didn't announce some price. They did not announce pricing, but this vehicle is the size of a Model S. So it's not small. It's a large sedan. It's likely going to be slotted just below their flagship, whatever their flagship is, like the Neo ET9. Okay. And I find it peculiar why we have a garbage truck day. It's garbage day. So if you hear the garbage truck, but I find it peculiar that, again, they launch with a sedan. Is that, in your opinion, or what do you think the reason for that is? Because let me say this one last thing. China is like the US. It's a crossover SUV country. Most vehicles sold are going to be a crossover or an SUV. So why sedan?
So one of the reasons I believe is Lei Jun himself. And if we look at the whole press conference, the 3 hours, all he talked about was the Taycan, the Model S. And those are sedans. And I think it's him personally wanting to benchmark and come out with the first model. And there's this joke, right? This is the Xiaomi SU7 is the Taycan for the young people, for the Chinese young people, or the Porsche. So I think there's one reason there. But the thing is, everything's benching on Taycan and the Model S. In reality, he is trying to compete with the rest of the China EV Inc. Forget about Taycan. Forget about Model S. They're not. I mean, they're not big volume models in China, anyways. And all he wants to do is to either lead or be number one or have the best at what he said, 100 features. So to me, I think it was a little bit overkill.
I do too. I think it was the kitchen sink approach.
And that, in fact, that overkill, that involution is the other, besides the price cut, was the theme for 2023. And you look at the final week of 2023, the ET9, the M9, the 007.
The GU07.
Yeah, every single one of those models had some type of overkill features where they try to lead in certain aspects of, technology. And if you don't do that, then you're just another also-ran, right?
We're seeing a bit of desperation from automakers. And again, I'll say this again. Some automakers are taking the kitchen sink approach where we're going to throw everything at our next gen products to see what sticks. And at the end of the day, as long as the price war cloud looms over their head, I think most Chinese consumers, I won't say most, I'll say a large portion of Chinese consumers are going to move to Tesla and BYD, trusted brands. NIO has to get past this psychology of the Chinese consumer that loves the brand, but doesn't necessarily want to cross over into purchasing a product. Now, I don't know what is causing that force shield or that blockage, but they need to get past that. And we haven't heard from XPeng, although that they are going to be launching a flagship vehicle as well. And so, anyways.
Well, NIO's solution for that will be to go down to the Alps positioning. And, right?
But it doesn't help their NIO brand. That's the challenge. So,
well, so for the only suspense remaining with the Xiaomi Su 7 is the pricing. So let me ask you, why don't the two of us give our own predictions on the starting price? What do you think? I mean, Lei Jun already said it. It's not going to be 99,000 RMB. It's not going to be 149,000 RMB. He says it's going to be a lot more expensive than you would expect.
So I gave a little bit of a background on what Xiaomi is to the Chinese consumer, because I think Western consumers aren't that familiar with Xiaomi. So Xiaomi started as a handset, a mobile phone brand that used Android as its software. And it quickly gained traction, because when I moved to China in 2009, it didn't exist. The brand didn't exist. They built a huge headquarters in Beijing. They hired Hugo Barra from Google to help with the software, and it became ubiquitous. They had these artificial lines for the Xiaomi phones when they launched, and then they had gained a market cap, so they were able to use their capital to acquire small Chinese companies that had nothing to do with mobile phones. They were more like lifestyle. And then they rebranded these products and these companies and created this Xiaomi lifestyle ecosystem. And so you remember, Lei, in Shimao Tianjie, there used to be a Xiaomi store. So once a week, I would just go in there to check out what was new. It had computers, it had purifiers, it has rice cookers, it had batteries. And so it really became this lifestyle brand. But for the Western audience, it is not Apple.
No.
It's priced very, very affordably.
Apple, but percentage-wise, it's definitely not Apple.
So want to be clear with that. But to answer your question, Lei, I think it's going to be probably 279,000, between 279 and 329, maybe.
Okay, so Xiaomi definitely is a lot more Apple now than they were 10 years ago.
They're trying to be.
Yes, but they're definitely not Apple. And I think the other really is just Lei Jun himself. He's just a lovable guy, right? And
he's got this weird accent.
I mean, he's been ridiculed. He's been mocked. I mean, the Xiaomi is just really, if we talk about the handsets, it's a no-frills kind of, Apple wannabe brand that resonated.
Yes, because it's created loyalty.
Yeah. So now that they have this ecosystem, and the only thing missing was the car, and now that's complete, right? They call it the human car home ecosystem. So this is why that's getting a lot of attention. So my prediction is, now he did mention 149,000 was impossible. He did not say 199,000 was impossible. So based on some of the chatter and their fans saying that if this was a model in the 300,000 range, they probably would not consider it. So I would predict that this will have to be in the same range as 007. I cannot imagine it to be more than 300,000 RMB because it's a Xiaomi, because it's not an Apple.
That's what I'm battling with, Lei, because that's why I said between 279 and 329, because that 300,000 is a psychological ceiling that I don't think Chinese consumers can get over.
And Xiaomi, I believe, they're plowing 10 billion RMB, right? To develop this model. I don't think they have any outside investment or financing.
I'm sure they're shopping for external investors, though.
Yeah, unlike NIO, right? NIO got the 2.2 billion from this NYVN or NVYN, but I just think that they're throwing it down a gauntlet that this will have to be. It's not a no frills, but it like you have to think about your customer base, what they expect.
That's why there's no pricing. 还不知道, right? 还不
Yeah, but I really can't imagine it to be above 300,000 RMB. To be honest,
I gave myself some wiggle room because I think they're hopeful that by the time third quarter of 2024 rolls around, the price war will kind of have faded and we'll see pricing, at least on the premium side, get pushed up a little bit more because it's going to be so challenging for the foreign brands that have been dominant on the premium side, because I know the want on the Yangwang and the Fangchongbao in some of these borderline premium Chinese brands will be to cut pricing in order to gain share because they're new brands. They need to establish themselves. You need to see many more of their vehicles on the road. And so it's going to put a ton of pressure on the foreign automakers. And I know Xiaomi doesn't want to get into that price war either with their first vehicle, but I think it's going to be pretty challenging. So I agree with you, but for some reason, I think that they want to move Xiaomi into the premium side, more premium anyways, than the current brand sits on the lifestyle and technology side. So
yeah.
But let's do this, Lei. Let's start out with the year in review, and you name your first couple, and then I'll take my turn.
I talked about the price cuts, right? I talked about the industry being involuted, जुan, right? This is a Chinese word for cutthroat competition. I'd say, looking back, I was flipping through my phone photos and looking back at some of our episodes and kind of looking at the really, I think one thing that come to mind is really, just the speed, that this China speed that, Ralph Brandsetter keeps talking about. Xiaomi being one, 1,000 days, right? Jiyue being one, and Xpeng launching 52 cities now. They're ADAS, city, urban, XNGP.
27 to 52.
Yeah. And Volkswagen talking about 36 months for the new CMP. And everything just moves extremely faster in China. Like you blink an eye, something happens.
I don't know. What do you think is the percentage of more impactful, the quantity or the speed? The number of brands, number of products, or the speed at which OTA updates come out, new features come out, new products come out? Because to me, I don't know if it's a 50-50 split, but last week sat down with John McElroy and he said every day he sees a new product.
Not an exaggeration.
Coming out in China. And so you and I, we're the OGs. I think you and I can kind of say that we are the OGs of kind of the China EV sector. And I'm very familiar. You're very familiar. And I don't know about you. I think you've alluded to this as well. We have a difficult time of keeping up. You're much better than me at the more domestic brands, but it is just really tough. I thought by the end of this year, things would start to die down a little bit, but they have not. But let me ask you,
that's
do you think it's more about the speed, or do you think it's about this continuous new product onslaught?
It's difficult to pick one side. Yeah, it's both. It's measured in months, not weeks, right? I mentioned that the Xpeng G6 I test drove in July in Beijing is old because of these new updates. More capabilities. And, if you don't do it, somebody else will do it.
And this is where the challenge is for the foreign legacies. The speed portion of it is a difficult enough thing to have to deal with. But they've never, ever, 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 in the 40 years that they've been in business in China, had to deal with the quantity at this level of quality. Now, they might have had to deal with the quantity, but never the level of quality. So their product stood out. Now it's the same or even more quantity, but the quality is aces. I can sell in Europe today. I can sell in the United States today. I don't need 5 years, 7 years to bring the quality, reliability, safety of these products to match what's in Europe and the United States. And I think that's really kind of the thing that is pushing the CEOs back a bit, is that everything seemed to happen so quickly.
Yeah, and that brings me to another, I talked to you about some of the keywords that stood out was really this shock for me too. And that'll be one of my personal moments of the year, was stepping off the airplane from Hong Kong to Beijing on April 14th, 3 years and 3 months since I was last there, and then seeing these vehicles on EVs on the road. I was like a 10-year-old opening Christmas gift. It's like, oh wow, oh wow. And then going to Shanghai, and then, all of these foreign automakers, they're aboard coming and being shocked. And then at the IAA in Munich, another second time at their home court, that they get another shock of this quantity and quality that you talked about. That right? I mean,
my counterpoint to your point, and let me stress that I don't need anybody's validation. You and I have a ton of respect for each other, because guess what? We know a lot of the same people at a lot of the same companies, or you might know somebody else at that company, and I know a person too. So you can check our receipts. But it was kind of like the Shanghai Auto Show for me was like, I told you so. I told you this was coming. Nobody wanted to listen. Now, all of a sudden, the alarm bells started ringing. And so it's just, I think, now that many, many, many more people, I just gotta. So Eric is listening. Remember Eric? We met him last year, not this past year, but last year, 2 years ago at the LA Auto Show. We had drinks with him, Lay.
Yeah.
He's in Shanghai, and he just DM'd me, and he said, I sat in a couple Neos, and he was like, these cars are awesome. So he's experiencing it firsthand for the first time as well. And Eric, I would argue that Neo's quality is probably a little bit better than Tesla's, at least the American-made Teslas. So think about that for a second. But again, I don't need any validation from these old analysts that are kind of meaningless. But it was kind of you guys didn't listen. I told you this. So yeah.
Yeah, and on the personal side of it, you too, is really just to be on the ground, see, touch, feel, drive, experience, everything, all the ecosystem, the cars, the ADAS, the charging. I know you visited GUID and BYD and some other places. I drove quite a few EVs, Li Auto, Xpeng, Avatar, Zeekr X. I rode in 3 robotaxis, Baidu Pony, WeRide. I mean, those are priceless experience to after talking about this for almost 2 years, and then seeing it yourself and understanding it. I think that's what I remember from this past year more than anything else, really. So I feel very lucky, and
I'll be quite frank. I want some of these cars here. At these prices, because we have nothing in the United States. A Kia.
We have Tesla. I mean,
I like these Kias.
I love Tesla,
and I love the Kias. But man, the Western consumer, if they understand the menu of options, the menu of products that are available, they would have a hard time. That's why a Chinese consumer takes 40 hours to research online, offline before they actually pull the trigger on a vehicle, because there's so many options at almost every single price point. And you don't get the same level of choice in the lower tier cities. But if you're in Shanghai or Beijing, Shenzhen, absolutely, you see all kinds. Now, don't get me wrong. The lion's share of them, they look very similar. and it's unless you see the logo on the front end, sometimes it's hard to distinguish which brands are which. But the X3s, the i5, the iXs, they get lost in this sea of green plates and distinctive vehicles, right? So, Eric, I hope you're enjoying Shanghai, and you're doing something fun for New Year's Eve, maybe partying on the bun at Roosevelt's or something. But yeah, the thing that I wanted to talk about, let me see.
No, I just want to add what Ash tweeted about that. All these new brands and cars being priced way above, right? The 500,000 RMB, the $100,000. Let's say $100,000, and you're only relegated to drive the ABBs.
Yeah,
that was funny.
Yeah, I 2024. We'll talk about this more next week.
Yeah,
for our look ahead show. But
and then the other two things I thought was that the key words were definitely battery swap and EREVs. Now again, represented really two of the big three, right? NIO and Li Auto, and what's happening in the battery swap alliance over the couple of weeks ago, and really the EREVs really gaining a lot of traction. Li Auto is doing what, 370,000 this year.
Yep.
And Ito is planning 600,000, probably with majority of those being EREVs in 2024.
I won't say they're planning, Lei. I say they're hoping.
They're hoping.
Because so here, remember, just a refresher for everyone. Tesla and BYD are the only ones. If they're going to do 600,000, that means 50,000 units a month. Tesla and BYD are the only two companies that can consistently do 50,000 a month.
I think I tweeted also that the record-breaking 2023, part of it is this, kind of the BYD Tesla rivalry. So globally, we know that the Model Y, in all likelihood, is going to be the top-selling model globally. Everything, ICE, EVs, and Q4 is where we watch whether BYD gets on top for the BEVs.
Wang Chuanfu and Elon Musk are both eyeing that closely. There's an eventuality there. BYD knows it's going to eventually be the number one BEV, not just clean energy vehicle manufacturer, but BEV.
Yeah.
It's going to be number one in BEVs. Now, there's going to be a million excuses from the Tesla stands, but at the end of the day...
I mean, well, one of them, obviously, me being a Tesla stand would be, well, sales is only one measuring stick. And granted that BYD does have a lot of their BEV sales in the lower segments.
Yes.
This is me being a Tesla stand. And profitability-wise, well, BYD and Tesla, they're both profitable, right? But I think in Q3, I think the margins, BYD was higher, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, there's many ways you can compare, right? But psychologically, you have these races, sales, whatever.
In my newsletter yesterday was the year in review. In my post on BYD, I'll just list them out, Lei. 301,000 vehicles sold in November. 170,000 of those were BEVs. It's the biggest brand in China, overtaking Volkswagen brand this year. It's entered 60 markets. Now, that's not just in 2023, but the majority of those 60 markets were entered in 2023. It's the second largest battery maker in the world with almost 16% global market share. It passed Ford brand in September to be the fourth best-selling auto brand in the world. So I don't know if that's still the case, but that's symbolic. It became the 10th largest automaker globally this year, and it hit the 6 million vehicle produced milestone in November, launched two new brands, Yaowang and Fangchengbao, and it's going to continue to move aggressively in 2024. And I can't think of any major hiccup in 2023 that BYD could not overcome. Now, you and I know that not every single one of their products is a hit. They have a lot of products But I want to emphasize BYD's operational efficiency. I just said in November they sold 300 or they shipped 301,000 cars. To be able to produce that many consistently over the last 11 and a half months is an amazing feat. You know, they had in 2022, they had a hiccup for like 6 weeks or 5 weeks, and then they just went back at it. So, and it really, it was very, very difficult for other Chinese or for other automakers in 2022 to build in the COVID environment and the challenging supply chains and the chip shortages. But BYD, boom, just plowed right through. So, so yeah, that's me with my BYD stand hat on. How's that?
Yeah. Well, speaking of the operational efficiency, when the COVID started and how fast they were able to become the biggest mask producer in the world in like matter of days. That's only one example. But I guess in 2024 and beyond, really how much higher they can climb on that ladder. So if we look at the top 3 automakers this year, Toyota 10 million, Volkswagen probably 8 to 9 million, Honda, Kia 6 to 7 million. You know, when are we going to see BYD up there? Or will we ever? That's the question
The only real way they get there, Lei, is if Europe, and this is the challenge for BYD because
being really global.
Yeah, because European and American consumers have choice. It's really competitive in these markets. So it's going to take much more time for BYD to gain significant share. And there's a chance that they will never gain significant share. I think once they begin to produce locally, which they will in Hungary very soon, and so at 3 million plus units this year, to double that, it's going to be a bit more challenging, especially if 20, 30, 40% of that 6 million comes from Europe or comes from non-Chinese sales, because they've entered over 60 markets. Many of them are in Latin America. Many of them are Southeast Asia. Those markets are tiny. So they're never going to get to 6 million selling just into Latin America, selling just into Southeast Asia. They need Europe in North America to also drive that volume like China does.
Yeah, and I think you pointed out in the newsletter an important factor of EU protectionism as compared to the US protectionism is because there's a lot of EU automakers in China, China being their biggest market. And so that's a delicate balance, right? Whereas, I mean, a country like France, we talked about that, not giving subsidies. But overall, so that's something to see in 2024 and beyond, and how much more success can these China EV Inc. have in Europe.
It's something I'm going to ask you next week, Lei, about EU and tariffs, and I want to get your thoughts on that. But let me see here. You touched on Li Auto and EREVs, the strength of China EV battery chip AV Inc. at Munich IAA. One thing that I wanted to point out, and I've mentioned this in the past couple of podcasts, is Porsche's 12% drop in sales from Q1 to Q3 of 2023 in China market, whereas in Europe and the United States, sales has grown, in so much so and shrank in China that the United States again became their number one market.
Yeah. Well, it's I think it's both of a product planning allocation and also market weakness together playing into why this is happening.
Just to give you a sense of scale, Porsche from Q1 to Q3 sold about 62,000 cars in China. So not a ton from a volume standpoint. Volkswagen brand will sell over 2 million units in China this year. So just to give you an indication of the sense of scale. And people always ask, is Porsche ever going to build locally in China? Right now, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
No.
Because the volumes are such that for them to build locally in China. I think they're absolutely correct and being honest.
Well, they said they needed at least 100,000 units a year in China to build.
And so, but I also think that it would kind of put their brand at a challenging position too. Chinese built Porsches. I think that that's still something that people need to get over for a second. So
yeah. The other thing was I mentioned a little bit about XPeng's NGP is really this whole race on the NOA or navigate on autopilot, this advanced city level without the HD map assisted driving functions, right? The NCA, XNGP, NOA, whatever, NOH, NOP. And what Xiaomi showed, right, in their press conference, that the ability of the car going up this parking structure and, summoning it back, these are a minimum, maybe, to be able to compete. And it's fair to say, I guess another key word would be just Huawei itself, because Huawei owned traffic in the smart EV space this past year, basically. And now we have Xiaomi joining, right?
Yep.
I mean, so the big thing to watch is Xiaomi has the similar channel network as Huawei. And I think Huawei itself being a kind of a sensitive topic, and with the Mate Pro 60, this nationalism, whatever, these are their pluses. And that's how they've gotten so much, not only online traffic, but traffic in the showrooms for the M7, M5, M9, and the way that Richard Yu dunks on other competitors. Everything this is what 2023 was about.
They basically bullied their way into the transportation space. They bullied their way, and in 2024, we're really going to see, I think. And this
two more brands under the HEMA Alliance launching in 2024.
And this is a sneak peek into next week's episode, but I think we're going to see the Jiyue, the Xiaomi, and the Huawei kind of separate themselves on the technology side a little bit and try to lean into their DNA coming with Jiyue coming from Baidu, and obviously Huawei and Xiaomi. Now, like you said earlier about when you were describing Xiaomi, it was a bit much. Is that going to be too much for the Chinese consumer? Because the Jiyue, great car, very, very technology forward, but it's still struggling with sales a bit. So is that too much technology even for the Chinese consumer? I think we'll start to find that out. Yeah. And, that could be one of the challenges, because it seems like that technology forward Chinese consumer, there's not a lot of them. And if Jiyue, Xiaomi, and Huawei ecosystem vehicles have to compete with one another, who's going to win out of those three? So, because the SU7 and the Jiyue 07 kind of troubadour, right? I mean, I think the 07, the Jiyue 07 is a little bit smaller, but
yeah, I guess also 2023 would be described as the year in which the consumer electronics, where the Xiaomis and the Huawei's, are in, really crossed into the smart EV industry, with NIO launching the phone, with Meizu, Geely's Meizu, with their Fly OS, and all of these, right? NIO's, what's their Sky OS, Xiaomi's Hyper OS. Really, you see this combination of, or the merging of the two industries, as Adrian said in the interview. And there's that Wall Street journal article about, beating, I guess, Apple to the punch. I think that was also a highlight of 2023, the merging of the industries. But the jury is still out, right? Of who can really get that ecosystem, get that seamless so-called human car home right. It's nobody knows.
And I got to point to the United States here, because one of the posts I had in the newsletter was that the Blazer EV launched by Chevy has been nothing but a nightmare for the journalists who had an early glimpse and did some road testing. Friend, Kevin Williams, he was supposed to have a Blazer EV for a week. He had it for less than 2 days, and it was so bug ridden that he had to give it back. And this is the challenge. We talk about the three Chinese brands that we feel are probably the most technology forward. The legacies can't even block and tackle when it comes to software development. Now, Edmunds had bought a Blazer for long-term testing, had it, I think, 3 weeks, and gave it back to the dealership to fix some bugs. There was 23 error codes. So think about this. Across the board, people are complaining about GM software. Now, the software team let this software out. So they weren't even aware of how buggy it was. Now, I didn't write it in the newsletter because I didn't think of it at the time, but at Apple, when you're about to send out, and we call them products, or Apple calls them products. Technology company calls software product. Most people will think a product is a physical thing, but to technology companies, product is also software. So what normally happens is they debug, and then they create a golden master, meaning this is the production version of this software, and we're going to send it out. Now, GM's golden master must have been horrible, and it should hit home. Not only do the foreign legacies who have Cariad, who have all these R&D centers in Palo Alto, need to learn how to do software, but they need to do it at a level that they can compete consistently with an Apple, a Xiaomi, Huawei, a Baidu, Google, and Amazon. And I'm thinking they need to learn how to be globally competitive on software development within 5 to 7 years. Sounds like an impossible task to me.
Basically a big fumble. I mean,
you
talk about tackling and blocking. There's none of that. You fumble yourself. That's basically what it is.
Oh my God. It boggles my mind. And I'm not a project manager on software. I mean, I've done it before, but I wouldn't say that's one of my core skill sets, but I bet you I could project manage better than some of the people that are doing it in the legacies.
Luckily for somebody like Ford, their 47th straight year where the F Series is the top seller, like 700,000 units. That they still have a kind of a like a protection for what they're not being able to do on the EV side.
But think of it this way, Lei. The other thing about these electric vehicles is that now, when it was too intimidating for most car makers to get into the full-size truck business in the United States, it's easy now because it's a platform, a skateboard, and a top hat. So that F-150 is going to see a ton of competitors in the next 10 years. It already has, right? Now, when we think of United States and full-size trucks, we think of the Silverado, and we think of the Dodge Ram and the F-150. We don't think of the Rivian R1T and
Cybertruck now.
Even Toyota builds a full-size truck. Nissan builds a Titan. So they know how lucrative it is. But I think it's going to really, really be difficult to hold on to the F-150 being that number one selling vehicle in the United States long term. And one thing that I also wanted to point out is that 2 vehicles launched or came off the production line this week using sodium-ion batteries. So that's real. That's a thing.
Yeah, which I think you and I saw that was unveiled in Auto Shanghai, right? The first model with the JAC, what's the brand? IEV or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so... Yeah, and speaking of battery, the other really the competition that we've seen the last week is really on charging, speed of charging. With the Golden battery, with the Qilin battery, now with the Xiaomi, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 260 kilometers. It's also that part of the speed. Yeah, and then the other thing was really, I thought, we talked about exports. So in 2023, China will become the biggest vehicle exporter and most likely the biggest NEV exporter.
Close to 4 million.
Yeah,
And I think about 1.5 million of those
a
are,
quarter of those will be NEVs.
yeah, more than a quarter, I think, about 30%.
And then we talked about, one of the memorable moments I'll say was us test driving the Zeekr 001 on U.S. soil.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That was, a highlight, one of the
We were
highlights.
one of what, 10
that
people?
I would never, I never imagined would happen. Like, oh, and I'm speaking that because the other keyword would be IPO. So now Zeekr, Lotus, I think Smart maybe, WeRide, RoboSense. Now the RoboSense I think is in Hong Kong. Innovusion, which is now known as Seond. Quite a few of these EV AV companies and brands are getting ready to IPO in the US amid this kind of current environment, right? So
I see, again, sneak peek into 2024, perhaps. I see huge challenges for these LiDAR companies that want to do business in the United States or IPO in the United States. I just don't know if there's going to be an appetite because, number one, there's a ton of LiDAR companies, Israeli, American, Chinese, Hesai is pulling everybody
Hesai's
down.
already listed. So.
Yeah. So, and Hesai is just really right now aggressively trying to take share. And this...
And Hesai provides for the supplies for the Xiaomi SU7. So
yes, and then in the midst of car makers moving away from LiDAR and camera only, low res maps or low def maps. So the technology and the philosophies are also shifting with regards to how to define smart and what's needed from a sensor and technology product. So that'll be interesting because what we plan on doing is getting a bit more knowledgeable about that. So because, man, LiDAR is just going to be a brutal space. And then the other thing too, Lei, the last thing I'll talk about is we kind of hinted at it, or at least kind of just talked about it on the surface, but a reminder to everyone that European legacies love Chinese EV brands because...
I was just gonna go there.
Okay.
Which will be my final. I made up this word of describing the two things that happen. Volkswagen investing into Xpeng and Stellantis investing into Leap Motor. The word I made up was China EVification or Chinese EVification, meaning in order to play or compete with the Chinese, you have to be the Chinese. And that's exactly what happened with Volkswagen and Stellantis. Those are, I think, the two kind of the blockbuster moves of 2023 for the foreign legacies in terms of how they block and tackle, right?
Yes.
And Audi with SAIC, but to a lesser extent, yeah.
I also think those were two of the more significant occurrences in 2023. I think that they have the possibility of completely changing the landscape for foreign legacies in China and for, unfortunately, the European market. As I think the overall trend of foreign legacies building in China, shipping abroad is going to widen. We've already heard Nissan, Ford, GM is already doing it. Polestar is already doing it. Volkswagen's going to be doing it, shipping Chinese-made vehicles overseas to other markets. So that's going to continue to happen.
Nissan,
And let me see here. Let me give everyone a recap of market caps. Now, you had mentioned Li Auto. It's a $39 billion company. NIO, as of yesterday or 2 days ago, they're 15.7 billion. Xpeng's 13 billion. They lost a bit due to Alibaba selling a huge block of shares. GM's at 49.5. Ford's at 49.5. Rivian is at 22, and Lucid is at 9.75. So now BYD is, I want to say 80 something. I should have put that there. and Volkswagen and Tesla are still, or Toyota and Tesla are still the number two and number one automotive market from the largest automotive companies from a market cap standpoint. But it's important to note that could change in the next 5 years. So,
and then BYD and Porsche are like number 3, like roughly the same.
Yeah,
I think, right?
So I think we covered a lot. I didn't want to get too into the weeds. I think broad themes. You and I hit on just about everything.
Yeah, and I think I just add one more. Like, I just realized that both of us have been able to drive a Chinese brand EV on 3 continents this year. So Zeekr in the US, Neo ET7 in Munich, and when you were in China,
man,
and when I was in China, we drove different EVs.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can't beat that, right?
Man.
And that just reflects how far the China EVs have come, right? I mean, sooner or later they'll be selling near you, right? That hasn't happened yet, but you're sensing that's starting to happen. Although the road will be bumpy, and then another pseudo Chinese company with the market cap of just a few $1 million, I think, was Faraday Future. We also drove that. In last month.
Lei and I took the last hour. It wasn't all inclusive, but I think we covered most bases. So
can't be exhaustive. It can't be. It's too much.
But I did want to also note that I witnessed history this week. I went to the Detroit Pistons game, and they played.
They almost had it last night.
Oh my god, dude! Oh my god, they so they've lost 28 straight now. The season record was 27, and the 2-season record, overall record of losses in a row, is 28. So we've tied that record. But good news is that the Lions have won the division, so a bit bittersweet for the city of Detroit. I also think that we should applaud the China market for still growing to probably 8.5 million units this year, while there have been hiccups in the US and European markets for EV adoption.
Which reminds me of the 4 numbers really to know about China's NEV market, what transpired. Basically, 1 million a month unit sales, 3 million a quarter sales, 9+ million including exports, and 30+% penetration. Those are the 4 numbers to remember. These are CAAM numbers, but
I think January and February, not only because of Chinese New Year, but there's going to be an exhale, and there's going to be because things have been going and heating up so much. But so Lei, next time we have our show, it's going to be 2024. So.
And next time we have our show, we get to say 2025 is next year.
Yes.
Let that sink in. In 2 days, we get to say 2025 is next year.
Yeah. Anyways, hey, everyone, we wish you Happy New Year, safe New Year. Thank you for spending time with us almost every Friday or listening to the recorded pods. Also, in 2024, we plan on getting back aggressively towards interviewing really interesting folks. So again, thanks for listening, and we will talk with you all in 2024. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Thank you from my side as well, and happy electrifying 2024. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye now.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.